Yo, what is going on, everybody? This is Beanie and welcome back to another all-time video. And today is my favorite all-time video that I've ever done because it's my favorite team. We are doing the Atlanta Braves. I'm a huge Braves fan and I've been looking forward to doing the Braves for a long time now, ever since I started the all-time series. And to be honest, maybe a little bit of bias shows through in this, but to be honest, it's an awfully good all-time team, and I think that it's going to have a chance to get to the top of the National League East. But I don't know, the Nationals were really good. The Nationals came out with a 22.6. That's very strong, and it's going to be hard for the Braves to break through that, but I think they have a shot at it. And the big hurdle to that is going to be repeat positions, because that can be a killer to an all-time team, I've found whenever doing this. And what I mean by that is the Braves have a lot of guys who can play first base or third base, but they can't really play anywhere else. So that's going to have to make me really figure out a way to kind of shoehorn guys into the lineup. And there's probably going to be a few guys that I have to leave off and put on the bench. But overall, I think it's going to be a good team. But with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, starting out with the starting pitchers, the Braves have an absolute two-headed monster at the top of their rotation. They have the 97 Necro, a knuckleballer, absolutely fire. Very, very difficult for people to hit. A lot of people say that he's better than the Tiant. I'm a little skeptical of that. I still kind of like the Tiant a little bit better. But this is a lot of people's favorite pitcher in the game, so it's nice to have him at the top of the rotation, and it's definitely a boost. And then you have the 97 Warren Spahn, who just recently came out. I'm a bigger fan of this card than a lot of people are, but I still think that this card could, maybe even be better than the Necro. I don't know. I still think the Necro is probably a little bit better, but this guy has such a good fastball changeup combination. It's a good 16 to 17 mile per hour delta between his fastball and his changeup. Plus, he has a screwball. Plus, he has an effective curveball and slider. He throws from the left side. He's got fantastic pronines. This guy's an absolute stud, and him and Necro provide one of the best 1-2 punches at the top of the rotation that I've done so far. But then you go down, and they don't really have any other diamond pitchers that you can consider, because we already have Spahn in there and Chris Medlin as a relief pitcher. So you have to get into the golds, and I'll be honest. This 89 Luis Gohara is one of the most underrated cards in the game. I don't see many people using him, and I'm not really sure why. This guy is one of the hardest throwing lefties in the game, as far as lefty starters are concerned. There aren't a lot of lefty starters in this game that really throw 95 plus consistently, but this guy is one of them. And to go along with that, he has really solid pronines, 79, 87, that's perfectly acceptable. He's got good break on his secondary pitches with a slider and a changeup. And that's really, you can throw a curveball in there. You can throw, a 12 or something. Maybe if he had another pitch, people would be more inclined to use this card. But as it is, four-seam slider changeup is a very solid combination. And then you go down and you have Sean Newcomb, who is also really, really solid. He throws relatively hard for a lefty, not super hard, but he can get it down there pretty quick. His pronines aren't as good as Gohara's, but they're still pretty solid. And he has a vanilla offering of four-seam, curveball, changeup, and slider to go along with some pretty good stuff. 72, 84. This is a guy that I would really like having in the fourth spot in my rotation. The fifth spot was a little bit more difficult to kind of come up with. It was between this 82 Teheran, the live series Teheran, the 85 Mike Minor, and the 84 Shelby Miller. And if I went with the 85 Mike Minor, I could have 4 of my starters be left-handed and the righty be a knuckleballer. And that would just be such a cheese rotation, man. Like, it would just be so effective. The problem is that this Mike Minor just isn't very good. His pronines are a bit underwhelming. His stuff isn't that great. His pitch selection is just kind of there. It's nothing special. So I decided to go with the 84 Miller, even though his pronines really aren't that much of an improvement, simply because his stuff is so much better. 84 velocity with 89 break. He does have 5 pitches, but his pitch selection is a little bit underwhelming because he doesn't have a slider and his curveball is a 12-6. But for the most part, it's not that bad for a number 5 pitcher. Whenever you get down to the number 5 pitcher, a lot of times you're just looking for someone who can be, you know, semi-effective and maybe give you 5 effective innings. And I think that this 84 Shelby Miller is that guy, more so than the Tehran or the Mike Minor. Even though the Tehran does have better pronouns, his stuff just really isn't that comparable. So yeah, I ended up going with a Shelby Miller to round out the rotation. And I think that the two-headed monster on top of this rotation, plus the fact that their golds are really, really good lefties, in my opinion, I ended up giving their rotation a score of a 7.4, which I feel is about right. Like, that's a good bit higher than the Nationals rotation that I gave them. I think I gave them like a 6.3, but I actually think that that's fair because the Nationals, their pitching was a little bit underwhelming, and their best pitcher was the Max Scherzer, who I've never really been a fan of, and I've always kind of thought of as overrated. So I think a 7.4 is about right for this rotation. Okay, moving on to the bullpen. The bullpen was even more tricky than the rotation because they just have a lot of, or not a lot, but their top 2 guys, the 99 overall Kimbrel and the 92 overall Medlin, are very, very polarizing cards. You know that I've always said that the 99 Kimbrel is one of the most overrated cards in the game. He's actually, I mean, he plays more like a silver than he does a diamond. But, you know, the more I think about it, the more I feel like against certain competition, this Kimbrel can be effective, but not like he's still against top competition. He's still going to get hit pretty hard. So you know, typically if I had a 99 at the top of the bullpen, I would be like super psyched about that. I would say, okay, this bullpen is going to be great. But I don't really think Kimbrel moves the needle that much one way or the other. But the Medlin, I kind of do think that he does, because even though that his per nines really aren't all that great for a reliever, you know, they look more like an average starter's per nines. The one thing that kind of sets this Medlin apart is a deceptive delivery and the fact that he has 84 stamina. So you can basically kind of act like a 6 starter for you. If you bring in, or if you get a bad draw and get the Shelby Miller, you could totally justify bringing this guy in really early in the game and kind of, you know, finishing it off for you. Or if one of your guys is having a bad day, this Medlin could come in. And this Medlin is pretty good. Every time I faced him, he's been a little harder to hit than I thought he would be. So because of that, I actually think the Medlin is probably my favorite arm in this bullpen. But beyond him, then they don't really have any gold relievers that are of note, but they do have some pretty solid silver ones. I ended up leaving this Bruce Sutter off of the list because his per nines just aren't that good, and if I kept him on it, then the bullpen would be a little too righty heavy. They would only have one lefty in the bullpen, and I wanted to get that lefty in there, that extra lefty in there. So I ended up leaving the Bruce Sutter off the list in lieu of a 70 overall, which you'll see later. But I did put Peter Moylan on the list, and Moylan is just straight cheese, man. He actually throws really hard for a submarine pitcher, and he has 5 pitches, and his per nines, you know, aren't that great, but they're not terrible. This is one of the most effective submarine pitchers in the game, or like extreme sidearm pitcher, whatever you want to call him. He's really effective. And I've really liked using this card in events that he was eligible for, and I don't know. I just think that this card is kind of overlooked, and it's a lot better than people think it is. But then, moving on to your 4th bullpen arm, I had to go with the 81 overall Jim Johnson. Even though Jim Johnson had an awful year this year, and Braves fans basically hate him now, this card is still really good in this game as far as like silver relievers go. He's a sinker baller that throws pretty hard. His pitch selection isn't awful, and his per nines aren't awful. Like he's just kind of like an average 81 overall who's going to play exactly like an 81 overall. So that's, you know, but that's pretty nice to have in the number 4 slot in your bullpen. And then you go down a little bit further, and you have to put the Aradis Vizcaíno. He's an absolute flamethrower with a good slider and solid per nines. He's a little tough to control if you're not very good with analog pitching or meter pitching or whatever, but he just throws absolute Ched. And that, you know, that's pretty nice to have. Maybe, you know, even think about putting this guy in the back end of your bullpen if the guy that you're facing is struggling hitting velocity or whatever. But then I needed to get a couple lefties in the bullpen, and Ian Kroll is obviously the guy that, you know, you would first think of going to. But I said, no, sir. Ian Kroll is not as good as Sam Freeman or Rex Brothers. I like the Brothers and the Sam Freeman a lot more than that Kroll. And this Sam Freeman is dirty. 4-seam splitter, 2-seam slider. He has great stuff on all of it. He throws pretty hard for a lefty reliever, and his per nines aren't that bad. I mean, yeah, his walk per nine is a little low, so he might be a little tough to control. But man, 79-70 for a 70 overall, that's pretty darn good. And then you move on to this Rex Brothers card, and this Rex Brothers card really isn't that bad either. He's you know, 4-seam slider, changeup, and he also has really good stuff. And his per nines aren't quite as good as the Sam Freeman, but they're not that far behind. I really, really like having these two in the bullpen, and I think that they would play well above that 70 overall. Maybe even the Sam Freeman could play more like a silver than a 70 overall. And I ended up giving the bullpen a pretty good score, too, because this was the hardest one. This was the one I questioned the most. But then I went back and I looked at the grades that I gave some other bullpens, and, you know, I look at bullpens like the Mets, and they don't have the top end talent that the Braves do, but they do have like a little bit more depth. So I ended up kind of grading them on kind of even playing fields, and I ended up giving the Braves bullpen a 7.3 because I just feel like even though the overalls may not be there, well, really I guess what I'm saying is that the overalls in the Braves bullpen are a little bit deceptive. Like, I think this 99 Kimbrel is going to play worse than that, and I think the 70 Sam Freeman is going to play a lot better than that. Same with, like, the Vizcaíno and the Brothers. So I think it kind of averages out and creates more depth than you would think, and I ended up giving them a score of a 7.3. Okay, moving on to the lineup. This was by far the most difficult part to organize on this team, just because, like I said, there are a lot of repeat positions. But at catcher, you have to start out with an 88 overall McCann. A lot of people were disappointed with this card, and I can totally see why. As a hitter, he's not anything to, like, write home about, but he's not terrible. You know, 67-72 versus righties. You know, that's enough to be a semi-effective hitter. And 62-63, maybe you want to find a platoon for him, but he's not going to, you know, just, like, fall on his face offensively. But on defense, he's pretty darn good. I mean, 80 with 84 fielding and all that. That's a pretty good defensive catcher. And then at first base, this is where it started to get really tough. I ended up going with the 92 Freeman, even though I had a lot of other options, just because I think that this was the best one. I really don't have any, like, terrific justifications for it, other than I think Freeman is the most balanced of all the options there. At second base, I ended up going with, obviously, it wasn't even a question. I had to go with the 87 Ozzie Albies. A switch hitter, got some speed, got good defense, hits lefties pretty well, and he's not terrible against righties. You know, he doesn't have the power that you would want, maybe, but overall, I would say this is a pretty solid card to have at second base. And then at third base, this is going to surprise you guys. It was between the 99 Chipper and the 99 Matthews, obviously. I ended up going with Eddie Matthews because I needed some outfielders, and the 99 Chipper can't play left field. The 95 Chipper can play left field. So, and Eddie Matthews really doesn't have that good of he doesn't have another card that's as good as, like, this 95 Chipper. So I ended up kind of diversifying a little bit more, and I went with a 99 Matthews, who is, you know, obviously just going to be an absolute stud at third base as far as hitting and everything like that goes. So I really regret not being able to get this 99 Chipper on the team. I really do. I wish, I mean, even though I don't have it, it's probably my favorite card in the game, you know, just because I'm a huge fan of Chipper Jones. So I regret that in a big way. But let's move on. We'll figure out where to get Chipper in here later. At shortstop, Dansby Swanson, 88 overall. I thought about putting Yunel Escobar in here, but the fact that he hits righties, you know, just a lot better. This lineup ended up having a lot of guys who hit righties better than lefties. So I left him off of it just because I didn't need another guy like that. I needed a more balanced hitter. And Dansby definitely provides that. You know, he's got some pop, got some speed, got some defense. Not a ton of pop. I say pop. I mean, you know, he's got enough power to hit one out if you really get a hold of it. And he's got good contact to go along with it, and maybe a little positional versatility so you can kind of switch him around some if you want to. And then in left field, okay, moving on to the outfield. This is where I put the 95 Chipper because that's his primary position. And, man, I would really like to have that 99 play left field, but we had to go with the 95 overall Chipper, who is still a fantastic card. I mean, he's a switch hitter, great contact, good power. Lots of good things to say about that 95 Chipper. And then in center field, I went with the 96 overall Dale Murphy. It was kind of tough to figure out center field and right field. It was basically between Dale Murphy, this 87 Upton, and Ender Inciarte. But I ended up going with more offense rather than defense, even though this Dale Murphy is really good defensively. I went with him in center, and I went with Justin Upton in right field just to get a little bit more pop. Plus, another lefty in the lineup with Ender would have been kind of a bad thing. So I went with Justin because he can hit lefties better, and, you know, he's got some pop versus righties too. I just think overall this balances out the lineup more. But yeah, that's the lineup. Let's go check out the bench now. Okay, the bench is really good. You got to start out with a 91 overall Fred McGriff, who just absolutely destroys right-handed pitching. He is going to be your go-to pinch hitter whenever you need a big hit versus a righty pitcher. And beyond him, though, you have this Yunel Escobar card. You know, he's good versus righties, I guess, plays good defense, maybe a defensive replacement at some point or something like that. I don't know how much utility he would get, but he needed to be on the team. Then the 84 overall Ender Inciarte. I still don't know how Ender isn't a gold. I think he totally deserves it. But great defensively, good speed, great contact. But the big flaw with him is not a lot of power. So yeah, we had to get Ender on the team. Then we went with Matt Kemp to get a right-handed bat who could hit it pretty effectively against both sides. That's basically it. That's what you want out of that. And then I wanted a platoon for Brian McCann, and it was between Tyler Flowers and Kurt Suzuki, but since I needed a guy who hit lefties good, I went with Kurt Suzuki, plus he's a little bit better defensively. So that rounds out the bench, and taking the lineup in the bench into account, I think that this was an above-average lineup, but not... I would say the pitching is probably a little bit better. This lineup would be a lot better if you were able to fit guys more effectively into positions. Like if I were able to get McGriff and this 99 Chipper into the lineup, it would be one of the best that I've graded so far. But unfortunately, I couldn't. So yeah, I ended up giving them a score of a 6.9. And once you add all of that up, you come out with a score of a 21.6, which is good for second in the division. Honestly, I think anything anywhere from like a 19 to a 22 would have been fair for the Braves, and I ended up going on the higher end of that just because maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I do see a lot of potential here. That it wasn't quite enough to catch the Nationals. The Nationals end up winning this division in terms of their all-time team and I guess in real life too. But I still think the Braves make a very, very effective lineup with all this, and I like them. I think that this is a very solid team if you want to go out there and put it together. But yeah, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching. Please leave a like, subscribe if you like what you saw. And I'm going to be trying to stream later on today. I ended up doing this instead of a morning time stream. But tomorrow I'm probably not going to have a video out. I'm probably going to stream twice instead. And then on Saturday I'll probably try to have another all-time video for you guys out though. So yeah, thanks for stopping by, guys. Thanks for watching. I love you guys. I will see y'all later on today, and peace.